Mentioned off the top, the big story of the day, Jasmine Crockett makes it official, but there's so much more unfolding on this big Monday night. ION Politics reporter Jack Fink's been working his sources through the afternoon. Let's dive in right off the top. You are exactly where Jasmine Crockett wrapped up just an hour and 5 minutes ago.
Well, that's exactly right, Doug. And, you know, one of the interesting things, this was really all but a fait accompli. And Jasmine Crockett has said she has become more comfortable with the idea of running for U.S. Senate over the past several months when she started looking at more of the polls that she said showed that she could not only win a Democratic primary, but also the general election next year in this U.S. Senate race against any of the Republicans. She was very vague just now when we spoke about that. But before we do that, there are some actual political dominoes that we want to talk about. The first of them is Congressman Marc Veasey of Fort Worth. The Democratic congressman announced today, where he actually filed his paperwork to run for Tarrant County judge. So he's actually not going to run for re-election to his congressional seat. Instead, he's going to run to stay in Tarrant County as Tarrant County judge. He wants to take on Republican Tim O'Hare. And O'Hare's goal, one of his main goals since he was elected into office, has been to keep Tarrant County red and keep it the largest red county, not only in the state of Texas, but also across the country. But before he can run against Tim O'Hare, he's got to get through a primary. And one of the Democratic candidates he's going to be facing in that primary is the Democratic County Commissioner from Tarrant County, Elisa Simmons. She jumped into the race on Saturday. So that's going to be a very interesting race to watch. It's one of the political dominoes, Doug, in Crockett's announcement.
Yeah, and we're also obviously following the big shakeup in the U.S. Senate race here in Texas ahead of the state's filing deadline that technically is now passed, we know. We witnessed this dramatic shift in the coming Democratic primary. You see three faces here, but Colin Allred earlier today, I heard about it around the noon hour, Jack. I don't know when it was official, but Colin Allred dropped out and making the way basically now for Jasmine Crockett and James Tallarico. Talk to us about that. Tallarico, especially in the Democratic race going up against Crockett.
Okay, so let's talk about, the Democratic Senate race, and I'll get back to Colin Allred in just a second. So right now, with Crockett getting into the Democratic primary for U.S. Senate, she is going to be facing James Tallarico, the Democratic state representative from Austin, and he has generated a lot of buzz on his own. He raised $6.2 million in the first 3 weeks of his campaign, and he actually put out a statement today. And that statement, basically, he said, "We are building a movement in Texas fueled by a record-breaking grassroots fundraising and 10,000 volunteers who are putting in the work to defeat the billionaire mega donors and puppet politicians who have taken over our state. Our movement is rooted in unity over division, so we welcome Congresswoman Crockett into the race." And I did want to, before we move on to talk about Colin Allred, I do want to play some of what Jasmine Crockett said today during her speech before hundreds of supporters. Her campaign theme is Texas tough, and she told them that she believes she is the tough person to take on President Trump. Take a listen.
I'm done with going along to get along, and it gets us nowhere. I'm done watching rural hospitals and public schools close their doors. I'm done watching parents be afraid to send their kids to school or the mall or the movies because Republicans have flooded our streets with guns. I'm done with the senators sitting around doing nothing while Trump takes your hard-earned money, skims your Social Security, slashes Medicare, and gives tax breaks to billionaires. I'm done. I'm done watching the American dream on life support while Trump tries to pull the plug. The gloves have been off, and now I'm jumping into the ring. I'm asking for your support to be the next United States Senator from the greatest state of Texas.
Okay, so Colin Allred, this all happened hours after Colin Allred dropped out of the race. And this actually happened really early this morning. Just after 7 o'clock, he officially dropped out, and then about 3 hours later, we were there at Dallas County Democratic Party headquarters when he filed his paperwork to run for the 33rd Congressional District, which is in Dallas County. It is a newly drawn district, but a lot of the district is some of what he represented when he served 3 terms in Congress under the 32nd Congressional District. And so, you know, I asked Congressman Allred about his decision to drop out of the race. He said he did not want a brutal primary fight for a statewide race such as the U.S. Senate. But I asked him, why not run for another statewide office like governor, lieutenant governor, or attorney general? Here's what he had to say.
And to me, that meant, let's look at this, you know, from a perspective of, well, maybe this is an opportunity to go into Congress with a strong voice, to be a strong representative for us here in Dallas, and to make sure that we don't have a bruising primary and runoff that will now allow the Democratic Party as a whole in the entire state to be unified going into November. That was a real concern of mine.
And so he is going to be in a primary against Congresswoman Julie Johnson. She actually succeeded Allred in office in the 32nd Congressional District when Allred ran for U.S. Senate against Senator Ted Cruz last year. Johnson had already filed to run in the 33rd Congressional District. She says she's got a lot of support. I asked her about the fact that Allred dropped out of the Senate race and instead is running for the same seat that she's running. Let's take a listen.
Well, I'm not surprised. He was dead last in the polling out of the field in that race. So he was looking for a spot to try to run again. But, you know, I'm focused on my own campaign. You know, we've worked really hard for the constituents in North Texas, really offering positive solutions going forward.
And so this is going to be a very interesting primary, Doug. And one other person who was eyeing this seat, former LULAC National President Domingo Garcia, decided he would not run for this seat. Doug?
Yeah. What about Crockett's old congressional seat? What happens there now?
So very interesting. Her pastor, Dr. Frederick Haynes III, the senior pastor of Friendship West Baptist Church in Dallas, he actually filed to run in her district. His campaign filed the paperwork this morning. There was a draft to run Frederick Haynes, and so he is now running in this race. There may be some others, but Haynes is certainly very popular in this district in Dallas County in the 30th Congressional District. He's very close to Jasmine Crockett as well.
Before we let you go, let's talk for one last second about the Senate race and the impact on the Republican side of things. We know some Republicans were quick to social media, already reacting to candidates in the Democratic primary.
Well, yeah, I mean, look, this is the Republican primary is really what got a lot of this started, because Ken Paxton, the Texas Attorney General, got into this race in April because he felt as if Senator Cornyn was weak among the grassroots. And so a lot of the Democrats started to get very interested in the Senate race because they believe that Ken Paxton is going to win the Republican nomination, even if it goes through a primary runoff, which that race looks like it's going to do. And because of his political baggage, Democrats believe that Paxton is vulnerable in a general election. And that's why you've seen interest. That's why Allred jumped into this race in July. That's why Tallarico jumped into this race soon after. And that's among the reasons why Jasmine Crockett has entered the race. Of course, Republicans feel very differently. A lot of the allegations around Paxton have been out there for years already, even when he ran for re-election in 2022, and he still won in that year by quite the margin. He won re-election. So 2026 could obviously be a big year for Democrats, just like 2018 was. And so that's why Democrats have calculated that this is the race to be in. But Republicans say they don't care. They think that Jasmine Crockett entering this race is actually going to energize Republicans next year. We shall see. It's going to be fun to watch, Doug.